Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. There's a new architecture of power emerging around Donald Trump and his vice president, J.D. Vance. It's not just a campaign operation, and it's not just a political movement. It's something more deliberate, a network designed to encode their power into the structure of American life. At its core are three institutions working in parallel and in concert: the money machine, the doctrine factory, and the militant brotherhood. They call themselves Rockbridge, Claremont Institute, and the Society for American Civic Renewal, or SACR. But it might be more accurate to think of them as the financial, intellectual, and spiritual pillars of the Trump-Vance program, a program aimed at nothing less than remaking American democracy. There's a reason these names matter, because taken together, they don't just represent familiar partisan politics. They represent an emerging model for authoritarian power in America. Let's start with the money, because every modern movement, whether populist or plutocratic, begins with capital. Rockbridge was founded 7 years ago by J.D. Vance and conservative publisher Chris Buskirk. Their pitch was simple: build a mega counterpart to the Cope network, a tight-knit ecosystem of billionaires, donors, and strategists who wouldn't just back candidates, they built an entire system around them. Rockbridge's operations are sophisticated and deliberately opaque. It blends the power of dark money, 501c4s, super PACs, and donor-advised 501c3 funds. Since 2019, these channels have quietly moved more than $100 million into pro-Trump projects across the country. And it's not just campaign ads they're paying for. Rockbridge funds litigation, media ventures, and state-level political programs such as the Red State Project, designed to cement Republican control in key states, not just through elections, but through organizational muscle that locks in minority rule. Its private summits require six-figure commitments from donors. The guest list leads like a cross between Silicon Valley's libertarian elite and the internationalist right. Speakers have included Trump himself, Vance, and figures like Mark Andreessen, David Sachs, and Rebecca Mercer. Together, they represent something novel, a merger of wealth, ideology, and technology designed to apply a venture capital strategy to authoritarian politics. This is the brain trust of an oligarchic machine, one that sees elections not as instruments of democracy, but as investment opportunities in permanent power. And while money fuels it, money alone isn't enough. It needs an ideology to legitimate it, an intellectual framework that transforms plutocratic ambition into patriotic duty. That's where the Claremont Institute enters the picture, the self-described intellectual home of the American right, now repurposed as the doctrinal center of Trumpism. Under its President Ryan Williams, Claremont has rebranded itself as the dissident heart of the movement, no longer about conservative scholarship, but about defining an existential battle against progressive, multiracial liberal democracy. Its mission, Williams says, is to preserve Western civilization. In practice, that phrase has become a euphemism for restoring white Christian cultural and political dominance. The Institute's essays, books, and fellowship programs are soaked in the vocabulary of crisis. Talk of regimes, counter-revolution, and emergency. The language sounds academic, but its function is revolutionary. It reframes Trumpism as a moral crusade against a corrupt, illegitimate order. During the push to overturn the 2020 election, Claremont scholars and alumni stood at the center, crafting memos, shaping legal rationale, and providing the intellectual scaffolding for defying the vote. In the years since, instead of retreating in shame, Claremont has doubled down. Its thinkers and publications now celebrate Trump's 2024 return to power, not as a normal handover between political parties, but as a providential restoration of legitimacy. They write about it as a mandate to roll back the liberal reforms of the last half-century, dismantle the administrative state, and reassert centralized executive authority. In their world, democracy itself has failed. What's needed now is a moral regime armed with the will to rule. Through its fellowships, training programs for lawyers, law clerks, media figures, and Capitol Hill staffers, Claremont has spent years cultivating a new conservative elite that sees government not as a neutral system of law, but as a weapon to be seized and used. Within that worldview, minority rule isn't anti-democratic, it's righteous, even inevitable. That conviction binds it directly to Rockbridge's ambitions. The financiers fund the machine that Claremont's ideology justifies. But a worldview alone doesn't change nations. It has to be lived and enforced by people who believe it in their bones. That's where the Society for American Civic Renewal comes into play. the militant branch of the ecosystem fusing religion, masculinity, and politics into a disciplined subculture built for confrontation. The Society for American Civic Renewal, SACR, is no ordinary civic group. It's a male-only fraternal order founded by businessman Charles Haywood, a figure steeped in far-right Christian nationalism. Registered as a nonprofit fraternal organization under Section 501c10, SACR claims to cultivate accountable leaders for a civilizational renaissance. Its guiding ethos is blunt: to counter and conquer the existing liberal order. Membership rituals, conservative observers say, resemble a mix of religious oaths and pseudo-military ceremony. Swords, hierarchies, declarations of loyalty and duty. The organization calls on men to reject modern heresies, feminism, secularism, pluralism, and to dedicate themselves instead to a patriarchal Christian revival. Its rhetoric is steeped in open hostility to multiracial democracy, claiming equality has led to decadence and decline. Behind the archaic language lies a modern strategy, built a disciplined community for authoritarian religion and politics. SACR offers belonging and purpose to men convinced that the America they knew has been stolen. It channels that grievance into readiness, physical, moral, political, for what its leaders call civilizational struggle. The lines between SAR and Claremont aren't blurry. They're direct. Ryan Williams, Claremont's president, admitted that the Institute served as a fiscal sponsor to help SACR incorporate. Its tax findings confirm financial support. Williams himself sits on SACR's founding board in a personal capacity. Several Claremont-affiliated academics, including Scott Yenor, occupy leadership or advisory roles within the society. And Charles Haywood's own foundation funnels money into both Claremont and SACR, closing an ideological and financial loop. Claremont didn't stumble upon SACR. It midwifed it, legitimizing its creation, staffing its leadership, and embedding its ideals. It functions as the think tank's militant extension, giving physical form and spiritual discipline to what Claremont preaches in theory. All the while, Rockbridge hovers above as a financier and convener. It doesn't formally control Claremont or SACR, but it knits their worlds together through influence, access, and shared purpose. Its invited speakers and donors overlap with Claremont's intellectuals and SACR's patrons. Rockbridge supplies a billionaire capital that makes the doctrine actionable, the rhetoric audible, the organization sustainable. In its own description, Rockbridge exists to ensure we win, not one election, but the state itself. Each of the three institutions performs a distinct role within one ideological ecosystem. Rockbridge channels concentrated oligarchic money to fuel permanent power structures. Claremont provides the intellectual argument that excuses, even sanctifies minority rule. SACR grounds the project in Christian nationalist brotherhood, turning loyalty and faith into tools of mobilization. Together, they're building a movement designed to outlast democratic accountability. The financiers, the thinkers, and the soldiers united by purpose, constructing a modern American model of autocracy, one built not on coups, but on cash, conviction, and culture. It's a three-tiered system. Rockbridge captures the material levers of influence: elections, media, courts. Claremont captures the language of legitimacy, translating reactionary desire into philosophical doctrine. And SACR captures the human core, shaping an ethos of masculine duty and divine justification. When those three mechanisms work together, you no longer need overt violence to corrupt a republic. The system folds itself around the power they've already taken. The scale of this project represents something different from past conservative networks. The Coke machine was transactional: issue politics, deregulation, tax cuts. Rockbridge and its partners are transformational. They seek regime change to replace liberal democracy with a theological nationalism that cloaks hierarchy as virtue. The Claremont crowd provides the theory of regime restoration. SACR represents the imagined people who will enforce it. What makes it especially dangerous is how expertly it exploits American structures of law and philanthropy. Rockbridge operates through legal nonprofits protected by privacy provisions written for community organizations. Claremont's tax-exempt status insulates ideological propaganda from scrutiny. SACR's fraternal classification lets it cultivate exclusive male membership under the veneer of civic engagement. Every move is technically lawful, and deliberately so. This is authoritarianism hidden in paperwork. The vision binding these institutions together centers on one idea: that American liberalism, secular, multiracial, egalitarian, is not just mistaken, but illegitimate. The country, they argue, has fallen under the control of a regime of progressive elites hostile to real America. Their mission is to wrest power back through any means necessary. The ballot box, the courts, even the bureaucracy itself, all are battlefields for reclamation. Claremont intellectuals have turned that worldview into a theology of necessity. When they describe Trump as an emergency figure or Vance as a philosopher-politician, they're articulating a creed that places themselves above democracy. In their telling, Trumpism isn't the defiance of law, it's the restoration of cosmic order. That's the ideological DNA shared across Rockbridge's summits and SACR's ceremonies, the belief that freedom requires hierarchy and equality is decay. The synthesis is powerful because it wraps plutocracy, intellect, and faith into one seamless identity. Billionaires funding nationalism no longer look cynical, they appear devout. Scholars defending authoritarianism sound principled. Men pledging Christian duty see themselves as patriots. Each validates the other. What they're building is not a campaign or a party, but an enduring system of power, economic, cultural, and spiritual. Its goal is permanence, a government by and for a self-selecting few, justified in the name of renewal. Danger isn't only in what they could do if fully empowered, it's what they're already doing quietly, buying media ecosystems, seeding legal networks, rewriting policy language, cultivating cadres of activists bound by shared ideology. Piece by piece, they're engineering a future where opposition becomes ornamental, tolerated for appearance but structurally impotent. Rockbridge supplies the leverage. Claremont supplies the framework. SACR supplies conviction. Each operates within bounds that appear lawful, respectable, even admirable. Together they create a pipeline from billionaire donors to legal doctrines to disciplined believers, everything a durable autocracy needs. The overlap between these movements blurs a line between money and ministry. At a Rockbridge gathering, you might find major venture capitalists seated beside Claremont philosophers, both blessing their cause with the rhetoric of Western civilization. Across the same network, SACR members train themselves to embody that cause through ritualized faith. Oligarchs fund the theory. Academics define the dogma. Disciples enforce it. That's the loop. What we're witnessing is a structural attempt to reimagine the American right as a counter-revolutionary order, not to coexist with democratic norms, but to conquer them through legitimacy and law. It's a slow-motion regime change operating under the cover of patriotism. Individually, each component might seem like just another radical donor network, just another rogue think tank, or just another fringe religious group. But together they operationalize the same belief, that liberal democracy's time is over, and history now belongs to those willing to reassert power without apology. The strategy is calculated for longevity. Rockbridge's billionaire network ensures a steady flow of resources outside traditional party structures. Claremont reshapes the intellectual climate by training lawyers and writers to dismiss pluralism as corruption. SACR populates the grassroots with disciplined, ideologically hardened men. That synergy amplifies itself over time. It doesn't seek short-term wins, it seeks capture. And that capture has a goal: to replace democratic accountability with a self-legitimizing system of money, ideology, and faith. When those align, elections become rituals of ratification, not competition. Law becomes an instrument of vengeance, not balance. Religion becomes state identity. This isn't speculation, it's process already underway. The Rockbridge Network's funding footprint has expanded dramatically in swing states in the past several years, often through innocuous-sounding voter initiatives or education groups. Claremont's alumni populate key positions in the current administration, where they test theoretical emergency powers arguments against reality. SACR's chapters meet quietly across Midwest and Southern states, attracting figures of law enforcement and local politics. Each is building capacity for the same eventual goal: enduring dominance wrapped in divine mission. So where does that leave citizens who believe democracy still matters? The challenge can't be met by old habits of complacency. Sunlight is the first defense: transparency about who funds what and how they use the tax code to do it. Civic vigilance means tracing the flow of money through Rockbridge's web of nonprofits, holding Claremont accountable for its political activities, and exposing SACR's theocratic ambitions for what they are: preparation, not fellowship. But political awareness matters too. The next election cycle will test whether voters can recognize what's behind the slogans. Peter Thiel and other billionaires in the Rockbridge circle continue to see J.D. Vance as their chosen vessel, a figure who can wrap plutocratic aims in populist language and sell authoritarian restoration as working-class revolt. Democratic candidates must learn to confront that fusion, not with timid opposition, but with open explanation. The public needs to see the structure, not just its faces. Because what's at stake isn't ideology in the abstract. It's the future of American self-government. The Rockbridge, Claremont, SACR triumvirate represents not a temporary coalition, but a blueprint for post-democracy. A system in which money, intellect, and faith merge to secure irreversible control. It thrives on complexity, on the assumption that the public will never connect the dots. The response has to shatter that assumption. Transparency in tax enforcement, independent journalism that follows the funding trails, political campaigns that frame the issue plainly. This isn't left versus right. This is democracy versus hierarchy. Authoritarianism in the 21st century doesn't always wear jackboots. Sometimes it wears suits, publishes essays, and holds prayer breakfasts. It holds summits and golf resorts instead of secret bunkers. It rewrites constitutions through think tanks instead of armies. Rockbridge, Claremont, and SACR are the American expression of that model. Polite, professional, and profoundly dangerous. Most of the power of authoritarianism, as historian Timothy Snyder has warned, is freely given. That's the quiet risk before us now. We could surrender democratic norms piece by piece, mistaking organization for legitimacy and zeal for renewal. We could watch a network of billionaires, ideologues, and believers claim the mantle of civilization while dismantling its freedoms. Rockbridge moves the money, Claremont shapes the mind, SACR molds the soul. Each alone undermines democracy. Together they attempt to replace it. The financiers, the philosophers, and the faithful joined in one cause, to ensure liberal democracy never recovers. They call it renewal, revival, preservation, but stripped of its rhetoric, its domination, the permanent subordination of pluralism to hierarchy. That's the reality confronting the country now. The architecture of an American autocracy is already under construction, built with philanthropic dollars, fortified by doctrine, and blessed by religion. It will stand unless enough people see its blueprint for what it is and refuse to give their consent, because every system of control, no matter how sophisticated, still depends on silence. And the only way to stop the triumvirate that seeks to replace our democracy is to talk about it openly, expose its workings, and make clear to every citizen that the line between renewal and replacement has already been crossed. The time for recognizing the threat is now. Rockbridge, Claremont, and SACR are no longer shadows on the edge of politics. They are the structure behind it. If we fail to name them, they will write the next chapter of American governance, not as democracy, but as dominion. This has been America's Fractured Politics. Remember to keep the faith, and remember to fight the good fight. Organizations such as these can be beaten if we use sunlight as a disinfectant. Until next time, thank you very much.